Today's article will start with the most desolate and mysterious place on Earth. It can be guaranteed, at least 99% of the friends in the account have never heard of it. Saravan. Where is it? Another place that many people have never heard of. Baluchistan. What is this place? Vast. Wild. Of course, the most important thing is the drought. The living conditions in this place are extremely harsh. There are only a few oases outside, and all there is a large desert and barren hills, just like the surface of the moon. But in this kind of place, the struggle of human beings is still going on, and it is still the kind that stirs up the geographical pattern. We still use the old method, from the shallower to the deeper, layer by layer, and start to analyze. The outermost layer is, in the most desolate place on this earth, a few nights ago, there were sudden intense gunshots. The time is on the evening of May 20th. The location is Sarawak. On this day, the moon is running to the sun and the earth, but it is a little bit off the previous day, so you can see a small part of the moon illuminated by the sun, curved like a crescent eyebrow. The crescent moon. The legendary dark and stormy night. Taking advantage of the dark night, a group of people quietly approached the local Iranian border port. Gunshots sounded. The media reported this way. After the Iranian border guards stationed there discovered it, they quickly organized interception and counterattack operations and engaged in a fierce exchange of fire, after which the group fled. Just seeing this, many people will think, this is a successful interception. But the next piece of news exposed the truth. In the conflict, 6 soldiers on the Iranian side died. There was no mention of any casualties. What is this indicating? The target of this group is these Iranian soldiers. Because of the dark night, they were caught off guard and suffered a big loss. This attack is very strange. At this point, you can upload the picture. Do you see anything? The Saravan where the firefight took place has a very special location. On the border of Iran and Pakistan. Not far to the north is Afghanistan. What's more unusual is the identity of the attacker. Because of sneak attacks in the dark. So it has to be investigated. In the past 2 days, the Iranian side announced the identity of the attacker, the Righteous Army. What is this stuff? The Western media put it very simply, calling it an Iranian separatist organization. But actually, it's not that simple. According to previous information, at least in the early years, it had 3 behind-the-scenes bosses. One is America. The world's shit-stirring stick, everything can't do without it. What about the second one? The biggest big guy in the bay. The third is Badi. Seeing this, have you figured out what it is? On March 10th this year, under our mediation, Iran and the big family reached a settlement, and it is still going on vigorously. At this time, on its eastern border, such a bad thing happened. What would the Iranians think? But this time, the main target of this incident, judging from the existing news, is not the big family and Iran, but the other two, Pakistani Railway and Iran. Why? Let's go in and peel back the layers. Just 2 days before this attack, on May 18th, 2 things happened. It seems ordinary, but it is actually very important, the kind that involves the geographical pattern. One thing is, on the same day, in the border area between the 2 countries, Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Iranian President Rahid held a meeting and an unveiling ceremony was held. For 2 things. One thing is the opening of the first border bazaar between the 2 countries. What about another thing? This is the first cross-border power transmission project between the 2 countries. From the perspective of the matter itself, it is not a big deal. The border bazaar opened by the 2 countries is called Monday Pishin Bazaar. A city on the Iranian side of Paysan. Monday is from Badi's side. Neither is a big city. Pixan is a little bigger, and the local residents are just over 10,000, which is the level of a small town on our side. Even if the border market is opened, the trade must be very ordinary. After adding these 2 border cities, what will you find? Sarawak is not far from this newly opened market. This kind of desert area often has no human habitation for hundreds of kilometers, so it is actually quite close by local standards. The transmission line project is not particularly large. 100 megawatts? Every second, lose 100,000 kilowatt hours of electricity. But these 2 things are of great significance, because 11 years ago, Iran and the Pakistani railways discussed and said that they would open a total of 6 border bazaars on our border. And after that, more in-depth cooperation will also be launched. The second event also happened on the same day, May 18th. Zabihullah Mujahid, spokesman of the Afghan interim government, issued a statement stating that the water agreement signed between Afghanistan and Iran in 1973 is still valid, and the Afghan interim government is committed to keep promises. What kind of agreement is this? About how the Helmand River water is allocated. We need to know more about this river. Continue to the above picture. Do you see anything? The simplest way to say this river is, the water comes from Afghanistan, but what to use? But Iran and Afghanistan are too. Everyone knows that both Afghanistan and Iran are places with severe water shortages. God is merciful, given such a big river, everyone must use it desperately. As a result, the Iranians panicked. There are more than 1 million Iranians living in the lowermost part of the river. There is basically no precipitation in this place. These 1 million Iranians can rely on the little river water flowing down from Afghanistan to grow some wheat, barley, and alfalfa to make a living. And this place is also very strange. In terms of temperature, it is actually quite warm, but even if there is water to irrigate the farmland, food, vegetables, and so on can only be grown for one season. Why? Because there is a strange wind in this place, named 120-day wind, which blows from May to October every year. When this kind of wind blows, the sky is full of dust and the sky is dark, not to mention, because it carries a lot of sand grains and is very abrasive. Not to mention crops, even forests and shrubs will be in this 120 days. Was ground clean? In some years, if the wind is strong, even the houses of the local people may be worn down if the walls are not thick enough. Dust rolled up by the 120-day wind. How to say? Locally, if there was not enough water in the river in Afghanistan from last winter to May, and if the food crops were not harvested, the more than 1 million Iranian people would have to go hungry. Don't dare to go out. It involves the life and death of so many ordinary people. Of course Iran dare not be ambiguous. So it keeps talking to Afghanistan and asking everyone to allocate the river water. In 1973, Iran still had a king at that time, under the rule of the Pahlavi dynasty. What about Afghanistan? There is still a king, and under the Baraksai dynasty, the two reached an agreement. The Afghan side promised to supply Iran with 26 cubic meters of water per second through the Helmand River. What about Iran? It is a promise. Isn't Afghanistan a landlocked country? I open to you the use of 2 ports in the territory, Bandar Abbas and Chabahar Port, providing you with international trade corridors. The results of it? Everyone knows, in 1979, a revolution broke out in Iran, and the Pahlavi dynasty was overthrown. The Baraksai dynasty in Afghanistan was even worse, and was overthrown the year the agreement was signed with Iran. After that, there were all kinds of disturbances. Iran was the Iran-Iraq War, and it was sanctioned by the United States all the year round. Afghanistan was invaded by the Soviet Union, followed by a civil war for more than 10 years, and then the United States invaded for another 20 years. Iran's ports are not very open to Afghanistan. What about the water of the Helmand River? The Afghans, too, intermittently, sometimes fulfilling their promises and sometimes not. Speaking of these two things, do you see anything? It's all about Iran. They are all fulfilling the promises made many years ago. All show kindness to each other. You can also think a little deeper. As we said above, Sarawak is basically the most desolate place on earth. It was only 2 days after these two incidents happened. Why did a righteous army suddenly appear and run to what about the border guards who attacked Iran? The location is also chosen just right, just between the newly opened Mandar Pishin Bazaar and Afghanistan, not far away. By the way, I would like to add, this righteous army has been around for almost 4 years, since 2019, and there is no news of its activities. As a result, on May 18th, as soon as it showed friendliness to Iran, Afghanistan, and Pakistan, it hurriedly appeared 2 days later. Speaking of this, do you vaguely see a country? U.S. At this point, we can go one level deeper and see why Pakistan and Afghanistan expressed great friendliness to Iran on the same day and in the same place. Let's start with the previous situation. Whether it is Pakistan or Afghanistan, their relationship with Iran was not very good before. Last year, Atta and Iran had an armed confrontation. Why is there a bad relationship between them? Let's talk about this country again, America. Let's talk about each family here. Let's talk about Iran and Pakistan first. In the early years when the Pahlavi dynasty in Iran was still there, the relationship between the two countries was actually very good, so good that it was mixed with honey. For example, in 1947, India and Pakistan Railways fought the first war for Kashmir. At that time, Iran firmly stood on the side of Pakistan Railways. On various occasions, it cursed India, saying that it deliberately provoked the war. In the Second India-Pakistan War in 1965, Iran gave great assistance to Pakistan, sending weapons and ammunition, even fighter jets, medical teams and so on. The Iranians also told the Pakistanis, the land where you born is flat. If you really can't beat it, if the country falls, you come to Iran and organize a government in exile. We support you and continue to fight against it. In the Third India-Pakistan War, the Iranians also gave away in various ways. As a result, the Pakistanis did not live up to their expectations. Under the attack of the Indian army, the East Pakistani army quickly surrendered. At that time, the King Pahlavi was still very depressed. He told Newsweek, "The United Nations is useless at all, it can actually watch a country be dismembered." We also know what happened later. A revolution broke out in Iran and the Pahlavi dynasty was overthrown. The relationship between everyone suddenly cooled down. After all, the relationship between Pakistan and Pahlavi was really good before. Then, another reason surfaced again. After the revolution, Iran has very bad relations with countries such as Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. The size of India and Pakistan is actually quite different. Why can it carry it until now? Big players in the Middle East, like Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, have also contributed a lot. Like Saudi Arabia, it imports rice, cotton, fruits, and various textiles from Pakistan all the year round, and also provides various economic aids very generously. Even in 1998, when Pakistan's economy was very difficult, it sent Pakistan 50,000 barrels of oil per day for free. But the relationship between these big households and Iran is not so bad. Cannibals are soft-spoken and short-handed, so the Pakistanis are in a dilemma. What about Americans? I also saw the opportunity, and quickly took the opportunity to prescribe the medicine. Anyway, I tried my best to make the relationship between Iran and Pakistan worse as much as possible. For example, the righteous army is behind the United States. In the past period of time, it rushed into Iran from time to mess with it. The Iranians are of course very angry, so the relationship between the two countries is not so good. Let alone Afghanistan and Iran. The Americans have also found a way to discord with Iran. Hellman water. How to play it? We all know that after 2001, the US military occupied Afghanistan and overthrew the Taliban, forcing them to go into ravines to fight guerrillas. From 2001 to 2021, the United States has been in Afghanistan for a full 20 years. It basically has no interest in building roads, railways, bridges, etc., and even if it does, it pretends to be. But it is particularly interested in this matter, building a dam on the Helmand River. Made several more. Among them, there is a dam called Kamal Khan, which was created by the Americans. This dam can provide irrigation water for 175,000 hectares and more than 2 million mu of farmland in Nimroz province, Afghanistan. With this reservoir, the wasteland quickly became fertile land. There is also one called Kajaki Reservoir, which is bigger than Kamal Khan. What about the Iranians downstream? It is jumping. Less water flows to it again. However, just before Yang Jian was about to lead the army to set off, a strange incident happened. Yang Jian had a foot disease and couldn't make it. That is, Yang Jian suddenly got sick in his feet and couldn't go out, so he recuperated at home. Almost at the same time, even weirder events happened. On the 10th night of the 5th lunar month, Emperor Tianyuan left the palace and went to Tianxin Palace, but suddenly became seriously ill at night and his life was dying, so he quickly returned to the palace the next day. Emperor Tianyuan summoned his confidant ministers Yu Zhengxia Dr. Lu Fang and Yu Zhengzhong Dr. Yan Zai to his hospital bed to prepare for the funeral. However, Yu Wenayun's throat was hoarse at this time, and he was already speechless. Seeing that Emperor Tianyuan was unable to speak and was dying, and his successor, Emperor Jingyu Lincoln was only 8 years old, Lu Fang teamed up with Zheng Yi, a doctor of internal history, Lu Qiu, a doctor of imperial decoration, Wei Mo, a doctor of internal history, and Wang Fuji, a corporal of Yuzhen, and jointly elected Yang Jian to assist the government. After Yang Jian pretended to be polite a few times, he agreed. Therefore, these people declared to the outside world that Yang Jian was ordered by Emperor Tianyuan to live in the palace to serve Emperor Tianyuan's illness. At this time, Yang Jian's feet were not sick, and he lived in the palace that day, serving by Emperor Tianyuan's side. In fact, he controlled Yu Wenayun in his own hands. Yu Wenayun is usually mean and ungrateful, and frequently kills his close officials. Therefore, these cronies around him live in fear all day long, have no loyalty to him at all, and are even happy to see him die. Speaking, therefore, completely lost the right to speak, and even life was in Yang Jian's hands. Immediately, Yu Wenayun died. Regarding Yu Wenayun's death, the Book of Zhou, which records the history of the Northern Zhou dynasty, and the Sui Shu, which records the history of the Sui dynasty, have different records. The Sui Shu records that Yu Wenayun died of illness on the day he returned to the palace, while the Book of Zhou records that Yu Wenayun lived another 14 days before he died. But whether it is 1 day or 14 days, Yu Wenayun has been controlled by Yang Jian from the beginning of his illness until his death, and no matter how powerful he is, he has no chance to use it. This time is May 580. When Yu Wenayun died, he was only 22 years old, exactly 2 years after he proclaimed himself emperor. After Yu Wenayun's death, Yang Jian, Lu Fang, Zheng Yi, and others kept the funeral secret. Lu Fang, Zheng Yi, and others pretended to let Yang Jian be in charge of all Chinese and foreign troops. Yang Jian first seized the military power in his own hands. Among these people, only Yan Zai was quite loyal, knowing that this was not what Emperor Tianyuan meant, so he refused to obey the order, and he resolutely refused to sign the edict. It's a pity that the arms can't hold the thighs, and Yan Zai certainly can't change the Yang Jian people who have been planning for a long time. Lu Fang, Zheng Yi, and others randomly signed the edict for Yan Zai, and then it was promulgated and implemented. The imperial guards inside and outside the capital responsible for protecting the capital and the palace received the edict and accepted Yang Jian's command. The course of Tianyuan Emperor Yu Wenayun's illness and death is full of doubts. First of all, Yu Wenayun's illness is suspicious. 22-year-old Yu Wenayun was in the prime of his life. Although he had been acting recklessly since becoming emperor, it was only 2 years after all, and no matter how hard he was, he wouldn't run out of fuel so quickly. Secondly, Yu Wenayun's symptoms are suspicious. Yu Wenayun suddenly fell ill outside the palace for no reason, without warning, and the cause was unknown. According to the Book of Zhou, there were 14 days between his illness and death, but during these 14 days, Yu Wenayun was conscious, but could not speak. Although according to modern medicine, some cardiovascular and cerebrovascular diseases have similar symptoms, but there are too many coincidences, which are still not convincing. According to the principle of who benefits the most and who suspects the most in the conspiracy theory, let's take a look at the suspicious things about Yang Jian. First of all, Yang Jian had already led the army to go out, but on the eve of departure, he had a foot disease and failed to make it, and stayed in the capital. At the same time, Emperor Tianyuan Yu Wenayun fell ill. The timing is too coincidental. Secondly, as soon as Yu Wenayun fell ill, Lu Fang, Zheng Yi and others immediately pushed out Yang Jian, and Yang Jian quickly controlled Yu Wenayun, and began to control the palace, the army, and the capital in the name of Yu Wenayun. Too straightforward, too decisive. These actions are by no means like impromptu intentions, but more like long-awaited preparations. Another key point is that people like Yang Jian have no scruples when they do all this. They seem to be sure that Yu Wenayun would die, and they didn't consider at all that if Yu Wenayun got better, what they were doing now would be the result of the crime of ransacking the family and exterminating the family. So, can we infer that Yu Wenayun's illness is not a disease at all, but that Yang Jian sent someone to poison Yu Wenayun while Yu Wenayun was leaving the palace? Because from the analysis of historical records, Yang Jian not only formed an alliance with Zheng Yi, but even Lu Fang, Wei Mo, Wang Fuji, and other close officials around Yu Wenayun became Yang Jian's allies. Yang Jian's people, so it is not too difficult for Yang Jian to poison Yu Wenayun, especially outside the palace. Yang Jian had the motivation and opportunity to poison. Yang Jian's mental journey should be, at the beginning, Yang Jian just wanted to go out to avoid disaster, but with the help of Zheng Yi, after becoming the general manager of Yangzhou, Yang Jian hesitated again. At this time, Yang Jian should have thought of Wang Gui, the general manager of Suzhou who had made great contributions to the northern Zhou dynasty, Yu Gongzhen who was beside Yu Wen'an when he was the prince, Yu Chaiwen who later became the general manager of Qinzhou to avoid disaster, and Yu Wenchen, the governor of Bingzhou. Lift and so on. These people are far away from the court and guarding one side, but they still cannot escape death, so what's the point of leaving the capital by themselves? Previously, Yang Jian, in order to protect himself, should have made some arrangements inside and outside the palace, but he didn't start it. At this time, Yang Jian, who felt that whether he stayed or left, he could not escape death, finally made up his mind to take the risk and let Yu Wen'an be poisoned to death. Of course, due to the lack of historical materials, these are just inferences, whether reasonable or far-fetched. Yu Wen'an's death is still a mystery, and more official historical materials are needed to solve it. Of course, based on what Tianyuan Emperor Yu Wen'an did, almost no one was sad about his death, and it could even be called universal celebration. What everyone cares about is the change of rights that will inevitably occur after his death. How can he obtain greater gains, or how to stand on the side of the winners, that's all. There are two types of poor people in the world. One class of people is too lazy. So lazy that even if the opportunity was thrown in front of him, he didn't bother to pick it up. There is another category of people who work too hard. It is also because of working so hard that you are so poor. This can't help but make people think, why the result of hard work is not getting richer, but getting poorer? Because the efforts of some people are doing useless work, using tactical diligence to cover up strategic laziness. So it is not surprising that the harder they work, the poorer they become, not the luckier. Your efforts are not working in the right place, just creating a false impression that I am hardworking and feel good about myself. The same thing, if it is put in the wrong place, is garbage, but it is a treasure only if it is put in the right place. Efforts are the same. Everything you do has a price. And the most expensive price is time. Working hard on worthless things is just wasting time. You waste your time on cheap things, you are cheap. You will only be worth money if you invest your time in something with a high return. Poor people can't concentrate on doing things. They often do this listen to others say that to make money, and then run to do that. In the end, not only was the money not earned, but the time wasted in vain. If you are poor now, first ask yourself whether you have really invested 100% in one thing, and whether you have really persisted for a long time. If not, then you should know that you deserve to be poor. Real poverty is cognitive poverty. Rich people are long-termists. Rich people believe in getting rich slowly. They don't pursue getting rich overnight, because luck is too imaginary, and the probability of it happening is too small. Poor people are too short-sighted. They can only see immediate benefits, but not long-term returns. On the wrong road, one step forward is one step back, and one step forward is one step back. Only by walking on the right path can you make money and make a lot of money. Whether you have money or not has never been necessarily related to hard work. Some people are busy all their lives, but in the end they still have nothing. Why do we have to work hard to get wealth? Are those rich people 996, all year round? I have heard a saying that some people have exhausted their best just to live. But why do you work so hard, but still haven't lived an ideal life? Why do you work overtime until the early hours of the morning, but still can't pay the mortgage? After struggling for half a lifetime, come back penniless. Work hard all your life, and you will be the poorest in the end. If the meaning of hard work is to live, what is it but tragedy? The reason why the poor are poor is largely due to spiritual short-sightedness. They can't make money beyond their knowledge, and within their knowledge, they can't make much money. Wealth is the realization of cognitive ability. If you want to break through poverty, you must first change your perception. Wealth is not a compensation for hard work, but a reward for cognition. Success comes from precise diligence, not mediocre busyness. However, just before Yang Jian was about to lead the army to set off, a strange incident happened. Yang Jian had a foot disease and couldn't make it. That is, In the feudal society of ancient China, especially the slow development of natural science, people were easily influenced by some prophecies, and even believed that the prophecies were true, especially the ruling class paid more attention to these prophecies. Today, the editor will introduce to you 3 very famous prophecies in ancient China. 2 of these 3 prophecies have had results, but the remaining one has not yet been explained. Prophecy 1. Although Chu has 3 households, the death of Qin will lead to Chu. It can be said that this prophecy is the most famous in ancient Chinese history. It was said by an old man named Chu Nangong after Qin Shi Huang destroyed Chu. He believes that although Chu state was destroyed by Qin state back then, even though there were only 3 families left in Chu state, it must be Chu people who finally destroyed Qin state. Sima Qian recorded in historical records Xiang Yu Benji, husband Qin destroyed the 6 countries, and Chu was the most innocent. Since King Huai entered Qin and did not rebel, Chu people have pitied him so far. Therefore, Chu Nangong said, although Chu has 3 families, it has died. Qin must be Chu also. Chu Nangong's prophecy finally became a fact, and when Qin too came up all over the world, it was the Chu people who finally wiped out Qin. 2 Huye, the one who died in Qin dynasty. In the 32 year of Qin Shi Huang, he toured the north. At that time, there was a well-known alchemist in Yandi, Lu Shen, who was ordered by the first emperor to go to the sea to seek immortals and came back, where he met Qin Shi Huang. He presented a mysterious book called Record Book to Emperor Qin Shi Huang, which said, Huye, who died in Qin dynasty. At that time, Qin Shi Huang believed that the Hu people in the north were the biggest threat. So in order to prevent problems before they happen, he immediately sent General Meng Tian to lead an army of 300,000 to sweep the Huns north. First, they captured the Hintao area that had been occupied by the Huns for a long time, and then ordered the construction of the Great Wall to guard against the constant harassment of the Huns. But Qin Shi Huang never dreamed that the Hu who died of Qin refers to his youngest son Hu Hai. Prophecy 3, those who replaced the Han dynasty should be Tu Jie. Dang Tujie, who was on behalf of the Han dynasty, comes from the early Western Han dynasty. It is currently recognized as published in the book Chun Kai Prophecy, which has been lost. In this book, there is such a sentence, after the Han family was 920 years old, the grandson of Meng died, and he was awarded the successor. The person who replaced the Han should be Tu Jie. According to the above sentence, the Han dynasty will last at least 920 years after its establishment, and will be replaced by Dang Tugao in the end. Although the Han dynasty and the 2 dynasties were only together for 405 years, this prophecy has always been a knot in their hearts when the Han dynasty did not perish. It is said that Lu Che, Emperor Wudi of the Han dynasty, also attached great importance to this prophecy. He said to his officials after drinking, the Han dynasty suffered from the 6 or 7 disasters, and the law should be ordered again. Who should be the descendants of the clan? The 6 or 7 42 generations Han people should be Tu Jie. So what exactly does Dang Tu Gao Ye, who replaced the Han dynasty, represent? It's still a mystery.